All right, we're live.
We are rolling.
Yep, Facebook came up and said that we're live, so we're good to go. What's up, guys? We are here to take all of your Dynasty questions today. If you have any questions that you want to ask about the rookies that were just drafted this past weekend, or any keepers, or any trades that you might have, just let us know, and we're here, and we'll be here for the next hour, just answering any questions that you have. Jordan, you got anything right now?
No, I'm ready to rock and roll. If you guys don't already, we've been putting lots of content on YouTube, so check us out and subscribe. Got our new website rocking and rolling, thefantasyholics.com. I just put a very comprehensive rookie rankings list with every single offensive rookie that was drafted. Looks like there might be a few undrafted guys I'll have to add in there, but at this point it's only the drafted guys. But it's that time of year where I think a lot of people are getting excited about Dynasty leagues, so I see Twitter's very active right now, and it's a fun time to talk fantasy, especially with no sports going on.
Yeah, this is the best time to talk about it. Draft just happened. Everybody's excited about their new teams, their new players on their team. I gotta look for something here, so hang on one second. It's not showing me it's not showing me the comments. Okay, so there's comments right there. No comments have come in yet. That's probably why it's not showing. In the meantime, until we get some questions, we just did a 12-person 3-round rookie mock the other day. It was kind of filled up before me and Jordan got in there, so we were stuck with, I had spot 9, he had spot 11, and okay. Actually, you do have a question here, so we'll go to the question first. Thoughts on Malcolm Perry, drafted in the 7th by Miami, second in the nation in rushing yards, and had the same amount of touchdowns as Jonathan Taylor and Chuba Hubbard. Do you know anything about him?
Chuba. Yeah, no, a little bit. So I think he's going to be more of a versatile. I think everybody, this trend that I'm seeing in this draft, and you saw with Bowden going to Las Vegas, all of these kind of gadget players, and I think we've seen Lamar Jackson kind of transcend the quarterback position, and I think that's a trend you're going to see over the next few years. And I think Taysom Hill is really doing the same thing for gadget player. So I think that Malcolm Perry, more long-term, is going to be that kind of player. Plays a little bit of slot receiver, kind of move him all around the field. If you're in a really deep dynasty draft, I'd consider taking him, maybe in that 4th, 5th round range. Once you get to that point, you really can't argue with taking a guy like that, especially if he has some upside. If he plays more receiver, I like him even more because I still don't think that Miami has a really solid number 3. They got the 2 big guys there in Parker and Preston Williams. So if he gets a chance to play slot receiver, he actually might have some sleeper appeal in PPR leagues.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know much about him. I didn't really get deep into the 7th round and who Miami took, even though they are a division rival of mine. If he's got to make the roster. Obviously, he's got to get out there. Parker's not a fluke. Ed Fingerhut, you quiet that down. But yeah, he's got some targets to compete for. They're going to be. You got Preston Williams who's coming back healthy. You got Devontae Parker who's coming off a career year. Mike Gesicki who's supposed to be making that next bump as a 3rd-year tight end. Now he is, and I mean, beyond that, and they got those 2 running backs too. So beyond that, you're getting into like the 3rd, 4th, 5th wide receivers on the Miami Dolphins who don't put up a lot of points to begin with. It's really hard to say who's going to be able to trust in that offense.
Yeah, no, and I think especially if you're in a dynasty league that has a deep taxi squad, I'm in a startup dynasty that has 7 taxi guys. That's a perfect spot for Malcolm Perry.
And Brett, he's the one that asked the question. He also added that he averaged around 7 yards per carry in the Army offense. Fitzpatrick will start week 1 and spread it around, Ed says. So that's probably true. I think that Fitzpatrick is going to start the season. He might even play the whole year. Who knows? But, I mean, Tua's there. He was drafted at number 5. He's definitely going to get some time in. I would think so. I mean, unless they're either A, competitive, or B, just completely out of it. But one way or another, I think Fitz is going to start. They have to see if Tua's completely healthy. And if he is, I mean, before we know it, this offense is going to be his. Just don't know when it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the Miami offense too. I think it kind of went under the radar, but Matt Breida went to Miami, and I actually like that spot for him quite a bit. I've always thought he was kind of underutilized in San Francisco, so I think he's a really elusive back. They have Jordan Howard there, but I think Matt Breida will have a little more of a defined role with Miami, so he's a guy that I'm going to take some stabs at late in drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jordan Howard as well. Breida, I wasn't really a huge fan of him when he was in San Francisco, but now it's more he's got more of a defined role in Miami. I think that in San Francisco he had Mostert there. They had McKinnon, who was hurt, but he's still there. I mean,
It's
he's
Boy
on the depth
Coleman, right?
chart, and they had Coleman, so they had a bunch of guys there just waiting for carries. So I think in Miami he's going to be a lot better. The question is, what are they going to do with Kalen Ballage now?
I mean, they should just release him.
Coleman and McKinnon, and Howard can't catch the ball. Breida could take that job. I think Howard he's there to be the third down back, the goal line back. They kind of underutilized him in Chicago. He is a good running back. He's not your every down back though. I think he's going to be there for short yardage and goal line situations.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And Breida, so it kind of went under the radar. I was just looking up quick. He did average 5 yards a carry. That's why I always thought he was so underutilized. I think he has big playmaking ability, and even if he's a James White type, he has a lot of value in PPR leagues. I've never been a big Ballage fan. I don't think he's overly great, and I don't think it's a product of the Miami offense. He just doesn't look like a starting caliber or really a backup running back to me. I wouldn't even have him on a roster.
No, and until they traded for Breida, I was surprised that they didn't grab anybody, but they must have had something in the works and got Breida, so I'm comfortable with them going into the season with Breida and Howard. That's not a bad duo at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised too. I know I personally was. With all the picks that they had, I think everybody really had them taking at least one of the top running backs in the class, even if it wasn't, Swift or Jonathan Taylor or Hilaire, even a Keyshawn Vaughn or one of those kind of middle guys. But, I mean, they really didn't address it at all.
Well, as you know, we ran that mock draft contest, and a lot of the 26 overall picks were Miami taking a running back, like a Jonathan Taylor or a DeAndre Swift there, and I'm surprised that they didn't use it. A couple things coming in here. Scouting report from the draft of Ballage. Looks like Tarzan plays like Jane. That's a direct quote from the year that he was drafted. And that's from Ed. And then Brett.
That sounds promising.
Brett, the guy that asked about the first question that he asked, he said, "Love the Saints Winston signing. I think they have realized Taysom Hill can't fully lead the offense. Winston has completed more passes to the Saints players than Taysom has." Yeah, I saw that too. I think it was 10 passes for Winston and 7 for Taysom Hill. That's pretty funny.
You can't make that up.
No. But yeah, I mean, Winston's only 26 years old. The surprising thing is he only signed a 1-year deal, and I mean, if Breeze is there and he's there for this year, so it's like maybe it's there to learn the offense, play behind Breeze, and then sign him to another 1-2 year deal after that. But I would think that like if you're New Orleans, I think you should have signed him to a 2-year deal or so, have him sit behind Breeze this year, then at least give him the offense the year after.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for Jameis. I don't think long term. I mean, obviously he would love to stay with the Saints and Sean Payton, but I don't necessarily see him long term with the Saints. I think he just learns from Drew Brees for a year. That's why he said he had better offers, but he wanted to learn behind Drew Brees for a year. Then he can hit free agency next year and see if there's a better starting opportunity out there. I still don't think this means Taysom Hill is dead, or maybe I'm just in denial. I mean, they did sign him to a 2-year, extended him an extra year, so he's there at least 2 more years, $22 million for 2 years, which really is more than most gadget players get paid. So I could argue that he sits behind Breeze and Winston this year and then gets a year to prove if he's a starting quarterback or not. But it'll be an interesting situation to monitor all around.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how that plays out. There's a bunch of free agent quarterbacks next year. I mean, Dak Prescott being on the franchise tag if he doesn't get signed long term. The biggest name is Deshaun Watson, who's been thrown around either by going to New England or who knows what they're doing there. I mean, Bill O'Brien is ruining that team, so I would doubt that Deshaun wants to go back to Houston. So, I mean, that's the biggest name on the market outside or as far as quarterbacks go, and it's going to be fun to see how that plays out next year.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the Texans are trying to start over at this point, so I think it'd be a little odd if they extended Deshaun Watson. If I was Deshaun Watson, I don't think I'd want to be extended.
He's going to get paid somewhere. He's going to be the most coveted free agent next year. We got a question. Who would you guys rather have, Kerryon Johnson or Marlon Mack?
So I would say Marlon Mack, and I actually was answering questions about Marlon Mack a few days ago. So he's still young. He's been very good when he's had the opportunity to play, and not to mention he did have a few injury concerns, but I actually think once he enters free agency that he'll get a starting opportunity. So maybe this season he doesn't have a ton of value, but after that I think he's a starting caliber running back. I don't think Kerryon has as direct of a path to play. He's still got a few more years with the Lions. He's behind DeAndre Swift, who I think is more talented. So I would personally say Mac just because I'm assuming he's going to get a better opportunity in free agency.
I'd probably go the opposite way. I would probably rather have Kerryon. He is still. I'd have to check up their ages, but I believe he's slightly younger than him. But Kerryon, I mean, yeah, injuries have kept him out of the lineup a lot, and that's pretty much his biggest downfall. But I think he can do it all. He's a better pass catcher. We don't really know how if he's a better rusher. I mean, Mac has had a better career than him as far as running the ball lately. But I think that Kerryon is the better overall running back. And it sucks as not just a Kerryon owner myself, but like just them grabbing DeAndre Swift, and it kind of just hurt my feelings when they did that. I see you looking something up. You're probably looking up ages, right?
Yeah, I was just curious. I know Kerryon's super young. He's only 22. I think Marlon Mack's 24.
So not a huge difference. I mean, but one of them is hitting free agency, so he's going to be available. The other one is still there in Detroit, but. If the two are free agents right now, and I had a choice, I'd go with Kerryon, even with the injury history.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think running back, especially in fantasy, is all about opportunity and volume, and I think both of them don't have defined roles this year, so I'd go with the guy that's more likely to find a role next year. So I think if I was just going straight talent-wise, I would definitely pick Kerryon as well, though.
All right, and Brett's asking, well, he's just making a couple of comments, so I guess we could piggyback off of that. He's surprised that the Steelers didn't draft a quarterback. I am too. I mean, and then there was the rumors going back to that they offered Winston a lucrative contract, but I think that got debunked. I don't think they ended up doing that, but that would also be a good landing spot for Winston. Any thoughts on them not drafting a quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I was really hoping that Jalen Hurts would end up in Pittsburgh. We talked about that before. I'm a little surprised, but if anything, it really tells you how confident they are that Ben's healthy. I mean, he's still got some time on his contract, so I think they're still confident that he can play. And, if you told me that the Packers were going to draft Aaron Rodgers' replacement before the Steelers drafted Big Ben, I would have told you were a liar.
Rough draft for fantasy, especially. That's definitely true. I mean, we just talked about the Mack and Kerryon situation. I mean, those two running backs could have gone. DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor could have gone almost anywhere else, and we'd have two other reliable running backs in the draft pool. But now that they went to Detroit and Indianapolis, that just basically takes away two decent running backs. So that kind of sucks for fantasy owners. Also, Green Bay not taking a wide receiver in the first round or even early kind of sucks too. I mean, any wide receiver that you could attach to Aaron Rodgers definitely helps, and they didn't help anybody fantasy-wise that way. Jalen Reagor, he's being compared to, he's like a Nelson Aguilar replacement, so people really aren't liking him. I think that Justin Jefferson, though, kind of replacing Diggs in Minnesota, I think that's a great landing spot for him. I love that move there, and I think Justin Jefferson's going to be on my radar a lot.
Yeah, and going back to the Packers, I think their wide receiver situation and lack of taking one surprises me the most. I mean, I know they signed Devin Funchess, and maybe they have that much faith in Devin Funchess and all the young guys behind him, Scantling, Lazard, Kumaro's I think still there. So they have a bunch of kind of question mark young guys behind them, but I was really surprised by that as well. And I think the Packers have a really good history of drafting. And I think that was one of the reasons a lot of people were scratching their heads this year with the Jordan Love move in the first round, taking A.J. Dillon, which, I mean, makes a little bit of sense to me. That points to me that Aaron Jones isn't going to get signed after this season. But it was still surprising because they feel like they're only a few players away from being a competitive Super Bowl roster. So the fact they were looking 2 years ahead was really kind of head scratching to a lot of people. And I'm not a big Jordan Love fan, which probably doesn't help either. But I was really surprised by the Packers draft.
All right. Circling back around, Brett mentioned that he had Easton Mach to the Steelers. How do you think that would have been if he was? I mean, obviously this is all a moot point now because it didn't happen. But what do you think being Ben's replacement there? How do you think that would have worked out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Jacob Eason has a big arm. That's what he's known for. So I think that he would have made a logical replacement for Ben Roethlisberger in that same mold. I also think he's a great fit with Indy just because that's the kind of big arm quarterback that Frank Reich really likes to work with. So I actually love that landing spot for Eason, and I don't think you could have picked a better one. The Colts have a very good offensive line, as do the Steelers, but I think both spots would have been great for him.
J.K. Dobbins going to the Ravens. He's kind of in that. He kind of falls into that category of your Jonathan Taylors and DeAndre Swifts, where they have a couple other decent running backs ahead of them, or not necessarily ahead of them, but like why would they take him? What's your thoughts on that move there?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't overly surprised. I mean, number one, the Ravens are a very run-heavy offense, and a lot of people had them taking a running back. Mark Ingram is older. I personally think Gus Edwards is underrated. He's another guy that's averaging over 5 yards a carry his first 2 seasons. He's had 700 yards both years, kind of under the radar. So I actually would like to see him get more of an opportunity. But, they're probably long-term looking to replace Mark Ingram. I think that even after Ingram's contract is up this season, he'll return to the Ravens. And I keep saying that and people think I'm crazy, but Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram built a really strong friendship, which we all saw last season. And I don't think if you're the Ravens, you go in and tell your franchise quarterback, hey, we're not re-signing your best friend. I just think that that seems silly to think about, but I just don't see them letting Mark Ingram go. I think until Mark Ingram retires, he's going to be a Raven. And not that he'll be the lead back, but if J.K. Dobbins is splitting the load with Ingram, Gus Edwards, I'll throw Justice Hill in there. I don't think he'll take away a ton of touches, but if he's splitting the load with one or two other guys, that obviously knocks down his value a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we'd have to assume that one of these running backs, and it's not going to be Dobbins, and it's not going to be Ingram. So one of these running backs between Justice Hill and Gus Edwards are probably going to be one of those surprise camp cuts. Would you say?
Yeah, no, and I would say, I guess I'd say just from a pure running style standpoint, maybe you go Gus Edwards because they don't need the power back, and at least Justice Hill offers you a different dynamic. But like I said, Edwards has been very underrated. When they went on their playoff run or made the playoffs 2 years ago, he was actually a really important piece of that. So I like Gus Edwards. I think he's underrated.
Yeah, I've had actually a guy that's in a couple leagues that you're in too. Will, shout out to Will. He's been asking me about Gus Edwards in another league, and I don't want to give him up. I mean, he's in that run heavy Baltimore offense, and even if he is the number 2 or number 3, it's like he's got some value. I mean, even if he's sitting on my bench, he's got some value.
Yeah, and I want to go back quickly to Kerryon and Marlon Mack because I thought of something that I brought up last time I talked, but I just want to bring it up again for anybody else that's listening. Somebody asked me before if they should sell Kerryon and Mack, and my answer to that is a resounding no. You never sell a player when their value is at its lowest. You either want to sell a guy when he's hot and his value is really high, and if you have a guy like Mack and Kerryon, at this point just hold on to them, and the worst that's going to happen is they don't get an opportunity and you cut them. I mean, I'd rather take that chance than trade them for a third-round pick in a dynasty rookie draft. I'm a strong believer in holding guys like that and never selling at their lowest point.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Brett, who's been pretty active in the chat, I'm going to break this question up into a couple parts. So I'll ask the question, then we'll answer it, and then I'll ask the next part of it. So I'm just not reading and rambling. So the first part of it is, who in your opinion had the best draft?
The best draft, for fantasy, I think real draft and fantasy are probably two separate things. I'd say the Dolphins, just because the thing that I really like about the Dolphins, number one, I think Tua is a franchise quarterback, but I really like they really focused on bulking up that offensive line. And I think that's the best way to help Tua succeed long term. So based on their draft, they committed to Tua. They took a ton of offensive linemen. They took some gritty defensive guys, maybe some picks that were a little surprising, but I really think they were really strategic with their draft. So I like what they did there. Obviously, they had a million picks, so, they're going to hit on a few of them, you would hope at least. Second, another one that comes to mind is Tampa. And as much as people don't want Tom Brady to succeed in Tampa, I mean, looking at their roster, I think it's going to be really hard not to call him one of the front runners to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. I mean, their defense really came on at the end of last year. They traded up a spot to get Wirfs, which offensive line was probably their biggest need. They took Antoine Winfield Jr. in the second round, who was one of the top-ranked safeties in the draft. A lot of people had him as their top-ranked safety, so they got a great value there. They took Tyler Johnson later in the draft, took another offensive lineman, so I think they addressed a lot of their holes, and it's really hard. They got Keyshawn Vaughn, who I'm not completely sold as a bell cow running back, and based on Dynasty mocks right now, everybody's on the Keyshawn Vaughn train. I think he's a really good pass protector. I think he fits in really well with Tom Brady. So I think they were really strategic this draft, and it's hard to really bet against them right now.
Yeah, I mean it's we're still doing our breaking down of the drafts, and the only one that released so far was the Bengals. But I mean, even just thinking about the Bengals, I think they had one of the stronger drafts too. I mean, you're starting out with the best, arguably the best quarterback that's in the draft, and there's really no way you can mess that pick up, because even if you didn't take him, you were taking Chase Young, so you really weren't going to mess that pick up. They grabbed T. Higgins in the second round, who is a 6'4" animal. I like those taller receivers. I don't think that they really needed to go that way. And I said this, I don't know if I said this live or if I said this in our chat, but they could have went in a different direction in round two, any other direction, because they have a few holes, but they definitely filled some holes. They picked up an edge rusher, they picked up a couple linebackers, they picked up more another lineman, which line is one of their weakest points. But if they went with it in another direction in round two, and they let AJ Green play out this year, so assuming that he's on the field this year, then next year if they either are going to do well enough to kind of be picking middle of the pack, or later on if they end up making the playoffs, or they're going to be picking early again, then you go out and grab Jamar Chase, who was a teammate of Joe Burrow. So grab your wide receiver next year. But even with T. Higgins, I like their draft a lot. I was doing my reports. I do like the Lions draft too. They grabbed a couple studs, especially early on. I like the Giants first pick, and then they kind of stole Xavier McKinney. We were even talking about it during the live show, that whoever pretty much drafted him the next day was getting a steal, because he should have gone day one. But yeah, I mean, Brett says that he feels like Dallas had the best draft, closely followed by the Vikings and the Jets, and those are other teams that I've seen come up that have had awesome drafts. I mean, whenever you have multiple first round picks, that's always a good indication that you're going to have a good draft. But he also said that his worst draft was the Raiders, who did have multiple first round picks too. But and that's his next question too. Who do you think had the worst draft?
I mean, to me, it's still the Packers. I mean, and everyone that we've talked about, everyone Brett mentioned, everyone that you mentioned, everyone that I mentioned, they really filled needs through the draft. And I just still think that when you look at it at the end of the day, the Packers are one of the few teams that didn't improve at all from before the draft compared to after the draft. So to me, it's, in my opinion, pretty clearly the Packers. You could argue the Raiders reached on a few players, and I said live too that I thought both of those picks were a reach, but it's hard to judge what a reach is. In a few years we could be talking about Henry Ruggs as a steal, or Arnett as a steal, as the best corner in the class. Right now it doesn't look that way, but sometimes hindsight's 20/20. But to me, the one that sticks out is definitely the Packers, just because I don't think they filled any holes.
I'm going to stay in the NFC North, and actually, Brett already mentioned him. He said one of the worst drafts was the Bears, and I'm going to agree with him. Their second round pick, their second round pick, because they didn't pick in the first round, was Jalen Johnson, the cornerback. I think he was probably their best pick. They grabbed arguably the better tight end that was on the board in Cole Kmet, but that shouldn't have been their first pick. There's far other needs that they have on that team where a tight end is not gonna it's not gonna switch your team around. Then they grabbed a couple guys. They grabbed an edge rusher, a cornerback, a wide receiver who, in a class as deep as it was for wide receivers, I mean, Darnell Mooney, yeah. And then a couple offensive linemen. So they definitely filled some holes that they have, but I don't really see any of these people making impacts right away or even in the long run. The thing that I have against tight ends, I think that like the bad teams that draft tight ends early are the teams that just kind of ruin tight ends. If this was somebody like, say, San Francisco or New England drafting Cole Kmet, then I think Cole Kmet's a viable fantasy play. I think that you'd want to grab him in your second round of your rookie mock draft or just a rookie regular draft. But going to the Bears, it's like now I just wanted to stay away from him. I don't like that pick at all, and I think just overall they have a lot of holes. I mean, they should have just like threw darts at a board and picked that player, and hopefully it works out. And that kind of looks like what they did, but I don't like it at all.
Yeah, no, I agree that the Bears had one of the worst drafts. I think that pick was extremely head scratching. It was trending on Twitter at one point, but that's their 10th tight end on their payroll this season. Which is absolutely bizarre. So, I mean, the only thing I can say is from a fantasy perspective is the fact that they did take him there tells me that he's going to be involved in some capacity. And it goes back to, and I've said this about David Johnson a few times, how the Texans are going to use him because they would look stupid if they didn't. And I could say the same thing about this Kmet pick. Not that I think he's going to be a star in Chicago, but they're going to use him to some capacity. Maybe he doesn't get a ton of time in year one because old man Jimmy Graham's there. But, at least in year two and looking beyond, Kmet's going to have some sort of role. Otherwise, we're just going to keep laughing at this pick for the next few years.
I mean, if anything, Foles does like using the tight end, so it's if they plan on using Foles this year, maybe he has some value. I think the only person I'm touching from the Bears offense might be Allen Robinson. That's just because he gets value. I don't trust anybody else in that offense.
I'd still take David Montgomery, but I wouldn't be confident in it.
Yeah, he's a lower running back too. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't trust him at all. So Patriots had some head scratches too. I think Belichick's dog was making the picks. Yeah, that was funny seeing that on the TV. Falcons now have 12 first-round picks on offense for 11 starting spots.
And I think a lot of people with the Falcons too were a little surprised that they didn't take a running back. I've said before, I'm a Rams fan, so I don't really have faith that Todd Gurley's ever going to turn his career around. I mean, he does have arthritis in his knees, and people say, oh, he's going to get healthy. That's not one of those things that heals. I mean, he's going to have that for his entire life. So I think he's going to struggle to be as elusive as he once was. I think he's more north-south, first and second down kind of back at this point. So I was a little bit surprised. He's only there on a one-year deal that they didn't take at least some sort of running back. I mean, you even saw a guy like Eno Benjamin, who I liked heading in, slip into the 7th round. So even if it was a guy like that, I'm a little surprised. And maybe they have some faith in Ito Smith or Brian Hill there, who didn't really show many flashes. But I was a little surprised, especially since Gurley has an injury history too. If he goes down, theoretically, they don't have a great backup option.
Forgot about Quadri Olison too.
How could I forget the starting fullback?
How can you forget about him? Can Cam Akers realistically be the best rookie running back this year? I think yes. I mean, I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire has the best opportunity. I mean, obviously going to probably the best offense in the league. Patrick Mahomes loves to spread that ball around, but so I think he has the best opportunity. But Cam Akers, I would definitely give him a chance at being the best rookie running back, no doubt. I mean, he's a guy that I'm targeting because I really don't have pick 1-1 in any of my leagues except for one. I'm right around 1-2, and I'm torn between Swift, Taylor, and Akers. And just because of the opportunity that Akers has, he's pretty much going in there and basically going to command the role right away, and he's an every down back. I think when we talked about him when we did our rookie running backs, I think we all had good things to say about him. So check out that podcast too, by the way. But he went to a great spot. I mean, he went to a spot that obviously they lost Todd Gurley. Their other running backs there, Malcolm Brown and Daryl Henderson, they're kind of question marks. Nobody really had any faith that either of them was going to take over the starting spot. And then Cam Akers comes in, and I think he's going to take over. He's going to lead them, and I think he has a chance to be the best running back there. Plus, their offense it's not bad. I mean, they might still need some help on the offensive line, but they got the weapons around Jared Goff. If Jared Goff could play like an actual quarterback and not be a
No, that's not a thing.
$150 million bum, then and kind of open up the run game, that definitely helps. Van Jefferson going there definitely helps. So they got some weapons all across the board. I think Cam Akers could have a really good year this year.
So I mean, I'm kind of all over the board on Cam Akers. I'll say first that the Rams didn't have a ton of draft capital to start, and it's pretty telling that with their first pick that they made in the draft, they targeted a running back. I do agree. I think Cam Akers is a. The biggest thing that worries me is Sean McVay, and I think he's extremely unpredictable. And I think he's looking over at San Francisco right now and looking what they did with their three-headed monster, and he's kind of shaking his head saying, I think I could do that. So I'm a little worried that to start off, they're going to have a three-headed monster with, especially Henderson. People say he didn't look explosive. I mean, what do you have, like 40 carries? I mean, they didn't really give him a fair opportunity. I think that in the beginning of the season, you might see a little bit of a running back by committee with Akers, Henderson, and Malcolm Brown, who they really like for whatever reason. I've never been a big fan of his, and he has gotten a few opportunities, and I've never thought he was impressive. So I think that it's going to be a little while before Akers takes over the backfield completely. But I definitely do think long-term he has the opportunity to become the best running back in the class. Reason being, and you kind of mentioned Jared Goff already, but we kind of saw Jared Goff exposed last year when Todd Gurley wasn't at his best. So that Sean McVay offense 100% revolves around a really strong, elusive running back, which I think Cam Akers can be. So if that's the case, he's going to have an opportunity to absolutely explode. If they're relying on Jared Goff to win them games, it's not going to happen, which I'm a little concerned with. But I think that offense 100% is made for a three-down running back, which Cam Akers can be. I know, finishing it up, I think a lot of people are really concerned about the Rams' offensive line. I'm probably in the minority that isn't. They spent quite a bit of draft capital on a few rookies last year, David Edwards, Bobby Evans, and those guys got an opportunity to start at the end of the year, and they showed a lot of improvement. The Rams were one of the worst offensive lines to begin the season and finished right off in the middle of the pack, which might not seem like a significant improvement, but going from, they were actually 31st ranked for the first half of the season, 19th for the remaining part of the season. So not that it's a huge improvement, but if those rookies continue to improve and they can make themselves into a top, even 12 unit, that's going to help them. Because I think Cam Akers is the kind of running back, I don't know if he can make it happen by himself. I think he needs a solid blocking line. So if the offensive line is able to improve, he's able to take over that backfield. In Sean McVay's offense, he definitely has the potential to be the best in the class.
Yeah, it's all about opportunity. I think he went to a good spot that he could get some opportunities, so I like it. Brett says that he thinks Jared Goff looks like an absolute star when he has a healthy Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp's one of the better receivers. He just gets open for Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is a system quarterback, and it's any receiver there is not going to make Jared Goff look good. It's just that he just has to get the ball to his receivers. So that's all his job is. That's all he's got to do.
And I mean, I don't think I would ever call. And I've watched almost every single game that Jared Goff's played in his career. And I think the only time I've ever looked at him and said, wow, he could be a star was after that Kansas City and Rams game where it was like 56-54 or whatever the final score was. That was the only game I'm like, man, he can carry this team. I think maybe that was a product of just Kansas City having a terrible defense, but I really don't see. Like I mentioned before, I think that offense strictly revolves around a strong running back, and without that, I think I've seen flashes where Jared Goff can have a Matt Ryan ceiling. I saw those comparisons early on in his career, but I think that's really optimistic, and I think the Rams are going to be stuck in a bad contract for a few years. Him and his $36 million this year.
Yeah, just for breathing. He's got all the tools to succeed, though. I mean, he's got, like we already mentioned, he's got Robert Woods, he's got Cooper Kupp. They drafted Van Jefferson. The pair of tight ends that they got, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett. So he's just, I mean,
And they drafted another tight end, which was really strange to me, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Bryson Hopkins, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was strange.
Definitely has everything that he needs to succeed and carry the offense. He just has to get it done. That's what it all comes down to. And I think Sean McVay is a good enough coach to kind of progress that and make that happen.
I hope so. I'm not as optimistic. I'm a Rams pessimist, so I fear for the worst, but we'll see.
Well, they're only going to finish 4th in the NFC West.
Yeah, that's not bad. You can only move up in that spot.
Exactly. 2021 is their year for sure.
Oh, man, yeah, and that Jared Goff contract, I mean, I remember a few months ago I put that in our group chat. I said, do people realize that Jared Goff's going to be the highest paid player in the NFL this season? And people thought I was joking, but he has the biggest cap hit of any player in the NFL this season.
Yeah, if you release him or anything like that, you're gonna have to take out a second mortgage on the team. Let's talk about a rookie draft that we did. We were gonna do this a little earlier. So it was 3 rounds, only 1 quarterback. Just a bunch of random guys from different fantasy groups. Jeff Lambert over at Going for Two kind of put it all together. He picked out of the 5th spot, and yeah, I mean, we had a pretty good turnout. We 3-minute clock, so it was something that just kind of went fast, and we were able to get it done within 10 minutes or so. Clyde Edwards-Helaire came off at number 1, and Jonathan Taylor went 2. Surprisingly, though, it was wide receiver at 3 and 4. So, of all the mocks that you've done, and what I want to do too, actually, is I want to get a bunch of mocks together and kind of just do the percentages and see who's going 1, who's going 2, and stuff like that. But is Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor your consensus 1 and 2, or would you have gone elsewhere?
So, yeah, I mean, I have them 1 and 2 in my rankings. Helaire, once again, it's just opportunity. It's hard to argue with, and I've seen a few people, too, that point towards, Kansas City hasn't used their running backs in recent years. And I think that's a product of they haven't had a fantastic running back. When you look at Andy Reid's career, he likes to use his running backs. It's very odd what he's done with the Kansas City offense the past few years. So, I think that he's going to be involved in the pass game pretty heavily, and I think that's going to be by design. I think they're going to design screens for him, routes out of the backfield, kind of like what they did with Brian Westbrook, and everybody's talking about how Andy Reid said he's better than Brian Westbrook, which, I can see it, and I think that there's a lot of, at the worst, I think he's at least as good as Brian Westbrook was. So I think they're going to design some plays for him, and I have him for 1,200 total yards and 50 receptions, which puts him right around RB10 that he would have finished last year in PPR league. So, and I don't even think that's an unreasonable expectation, 1,200 total yards and 50 catches. Kind of a Miles Sanders season.
Yeah, definitely not in that offense either. And then, like I said, 3 and 4 went Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb, which is not it's not as surprising, especially with the landing spots for Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins and DeAndre Swift. But I'm kind of liking Justin Jefferson a little bit more around like the 4 or 5 spot as opposed to, say, CeeDee Lamb, just because. I mean, I know in Dynasty you want to look. You're not just looking at the current year, but you're also looking at future years too. But there's a lot of there's a lot of balls to go around in Dallas. And CeeDee Lamb, I mean, he was definitely a steal in the draft. We were talking about it when they picked him at 17. There was no way that we thought he was going to make it there. I mean, we had the Jets at 11, we had the Raiders at 12, we had the Broncos at 15. There was no way that CeeDee Lamb was going to be there, and boom, he was there at 17, and Dallas jumped on him. But I like Justin Jefferson's situation a little bit better, just kind of stepping in directly for Diggs. Adam Thielen is getting up there, so I mean Jefferson could be the number 1 in just a couple weeks' time, and Kirk Cousins, he's continuously a top 12 to 14 fantasy quarterback, so he's going to be getting the ball to his receivers and his tight ends, and I think Justin Jefferson has every opportunity to be up there. He was picked actually at, where was he picked? At 10th in this league, or in this mock draft, so he kind of fell. Jalen Reagor went before him. Joe Burrow, for whatever reason, went before him. So those were kind of the 2 question marks that went before him. So he could have gone 8th, I would guess. But what do you think about Judy or Lamb at 3 and 4 as opposed to Swift and Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor? Well, Jonathan Taylor was taken at 2, so Swift
Yeah.
and Dobbins.
Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly mention Jonathan Taylor. I didn't really talk about him before, but I have him as my number 2 because I think that the Colts traded up for him, number 1, and I always take stock in that. When you're trading up to get a guy, I mean, that's your guy, and, that's who they want to use long-term in this offense. He's a 3-down guy. He's going to have every opportunity to succeed with Frank Reich, so I always like Frank Reich. I bring up that name a lot. I think he's a great offensive mind, so I have Taylor, number 2, just because of the opportunity. If I had to pick between Lamb and Judy, I'm picking Lamb right now. In a dynasty league, obviously, that's what we're talking. I think Michael Gallup's not going to be there long term, is what I'm taking from this move. Him and Amari Cooper would be one of the most dynamic 1-2 punches in the league. And one of the biggest things, too, I look at quarterback play, too. I mean, when you're talking wide receiver, I have more faith right now in Dak over Drew Lock. And I love Drew Lock, but at this point, if you made me pick one of those quarterbacks, I'm taking Dak every single day. So that's one of the biggest factors for me is the quarterback situation. There are a ton of targets in Denver as well, too, and if you want to talk about winners from the draft, let's talk about Drew Lock, who is probably the biggest winner. He arguably, and you might say this is crazy, he arguably has the greatest weapons in all of the league. I think it's at least there's an argument there, especially with Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay, 2 Pro Bowlers in the backfield. You have Judy, who is a lot of people's wide receiver number 1. Sutton, who's up and coming. Noah Fant showed a ton of potential at the end of last year. They added Hamler in the slot. Their offensive line is pretty solid. Drew Lock's in a really good situation. But, there's a lot of targets to go around there. He's still really young. So, to me, I give the edge slightly to Lamb just because of the quarterback situation. I'm kind of on the opposite end of Justin Jefferson, and I guess I'll talk about this for a second. Not that I think he's bad. I think he's one of the most talented receivers in this class, but I just don't think that offense is completely made for 2 fantasy wide receivers. And I know people will point to Diggs and Thielen, but if you really look at their numbers, they never really consistently produced at the same exact time. Thielen had his streak, and Diggs was injured. Thielen was injured, Diggs went through a streak. It was really streaky back and forth. So, I mean, as much as he's going to be, he would probably be my wide receiver number 1 as far as rookies are concerned in redrafts just because of the opportunity. But I'm just not as sold that long-term that offense can produce 2 high-quality wide receiver 1s. So, if Thielen is, 31, 32, right around that range. So, yep. If he shows any signs of decline, that once again just raises his ceiling, Justin Jefferson. So I kind of like that 10 spot for him right now. I think I have him 9th in my rankings right now, so I actually don't mind that spot for him.
I might be reaching on him a little bit then. I like him. Just from a talent standpoint, I think Judy and Lamb are definitely better, but I think that the opportunity with Jefferson is up there. You already mentioned Dak Prescott and Drew Lock, but of the 3 quarterbacks, I think I would trust Kirk Cousins out of all of them. Just fantasy wise, he's been doing it for years. He just chucks the ball 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns. He does turn the ball over, but we're talking about We're talking about Jefferson. We're talking about my receiver. We're not talking about me picking Kirk Cousins. We're talking about me picking the wide receiver for him. So I would definitely take Jefferson definitely in redraft, I think. But it would be a toss up. I'd have to I wish I had a crystal ball to see what was going on in Dallas to see who's the quarterback going to be next year, or where Michael Gallup is going, or if he's still going to be there, or if Amari Cooper is going to just flame out or whatever. But
I thought you were a crystal ball guy, so I guess
it's on the charger right now. Jesse Taylor, we got a new guy in the chat here. Couldn't agree more on the Minnesota offense. They want to run, so asking for 2 consistent wide receivers is a lot. So he's agreeing with you, I guess. So how do we block him?
That's a Vikings fan.
How do we block him? So the next 4, Jeff, who ran the draft, he had DeAndre Swift, and then Jalen Reagor went at 6. J.K. Dobbins at 7, and then, like I said, it's a single quarterback league, and I know his time was kind of running out low, so I don't know if he panic picked, but Joe Burrow went 8. So any thoughts on those next 4? I think Burrow is definitely a reach and a little bit too high. You'll probably agree there, but what do you think about those other 3?
Yeah, so I think I have Burrow 13 on my rankings. I think I was looking at yours. You had him 14, 15, so we have him about in the same range there in 1 quarterback league, so a little bit of a reach I don't know. I think that guy actually might have ran out of time, so it might have been an auto pick there. But DeAndre Swift, short term, we've talked about Kerryon and him. It's not an ideal landing spot, but I do think that the Lions, even though they haven't run the ball recently, I do think that they do want to commit to the run more. They have Darrell Bevel there, who was with Seattle a few years ago, so his offenses historically heavily rely on the run game, and I just think they haven't had the opportunity to because Kerryon's been hurt. They had Joik Bell, who is not really a starting caliber running back, so they've kind of been in this running back carousel, which I think is the reason why they've been so committed to the pass. They just really haven't had any running backs that were talented enough to carry the offense. So I think long-term DeAndre Swift's going to be successful in Detroit. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to see past this season, and there were so many Kerryon believers, so I think it's disappointing for those people.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. Jalen Reagor, he was picked at number 21 by the Philadelphia Eagles, kind of going in there and replacing Aguilar, going on the other side of Alshon Jeffrey. Deshaun Jackson is still there. They got the two tight ends there. How do you think Jalen Reagor is going to be not only this year and then in the years to come with Carson Wentz, who happened to throw for 4,000 yards without any of his wide receivers going for 500 or more last year?
Yeah, no, I mean, I mentioned Jalen Reagor in a mock draft I did with Jeff a little while ago, and I like Reagor more than other people. He's a great down-the-field threat. I don't know what the final total was on how many wide receivers that the Eagles added this draft. I mean, they drafted, I think, 3. They just signed a few more and a few undrafted guys. So, I mean, they might have added 5 guys since the draft started. So, and there's a common theme. All of them are really speedy guys, which is something they've had Deshaun Jackson there, who's been older since Wentz has been there. But Carson Wentz does have a really big arm, but he hasn't really gotten the opportunity to show that because he hasn't had a consistent young down the field threat. So I think you can kind of see that's what they're trying to do is really stretch the field. I expect Miles Sanders to have a large role, as you know. So I like Reagor's fit there. I think him and Justin Jefferson both were great fits there. I think Justin Jefferson's better, but Reagor's a good fit there as well.
Yeah, I was surprised, and I think all of our Philly friends were surprised too that Justin Jefferson wasn't the pick there. Then the back half of the back quarter of the first round, Cam Akers, I took him at 9. 10 was an auto pick, but Justin Jefferson. So I was kind of between those two, but Cam Akers was there, and I'd rather load up on the running back. And then you picked Henry Ruggs over Brandon Ayuk and looks like Chanel went Denzel Mims went the pick right after that. So like you were kind of between. Well, I don't know if you personally were between those 3 wide receivers, but those are the next 3 wide receivers on the board, and you went with the Ruggs out of all of them.
Yeah, no, and I actually have Ruggs as my 5th pick in Dynasty format, so I know I'm in the minority there, but he has a ton of speed. People will point that he didn't really produce at Alabama. I'm not as concerned about that, but he has great hands, great speed. I think I just have faith that John Gruden's going to use him appropriately, and I really think that he's a Tyreek Hill kind of player. It's hard to find that mix of speed and hands. He's not the greatest route runner, but I think that's something that he can improve upon. So I think he's really going to be able to stretch the field for the Raiders. Not that Derek Carr has the biggest arm, but if there's a biggest benefit of Ruggs going there, it's Hunter Renfrow. But I love Henry Ruggs and his talent. And when you're picking in the 11th spot, all of those wide receivers are going to have opportunities. But to me, Ruggs is the most talented. And not to mention, I think from day one, he's going to start. He doesn't have a ton of competition. I mean, they have Tyrell Williams there, who's a okay number 2. Renfro's in the slot. But, I mean, overall, from day one, Henry Ruggs is going to start, have an opportunity. And I personally just really like his talent.
All right, and then Brandon Ayuk went right after you, and then it goes back to the first pick because and I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but rookie draft should be linear, just so everybody out there is aware. And I've seen a lot of rookie drafts go in their snake, and that's not the way to go. Rookie draft should be linear. The only argument would be for if it's a startup dynasty, and I mean rules should have to be in place before you even get into the draft, but all rookie drafts should be linear. So we go back to the top of the second round. Denzel Mims went first in that round, then Keyshawn Vaughn, and then T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. So a couple of those guys that were that the guys that took Judy and Lamb doubled up on wide receivers with Higgins and Pittman. Two very good options. Two guys that I think are going to make some noise this year in the rookie year, and then for years to come, especially T. Higgins with the unknown, the uncertainty of AJ Green, if this is his last year there in Cincinnati, if he signs longer or whatnot, and John Ross, who has been kind of a disappointment for them. So I think T. Higgins I think he'll have a decent year this year. I don't know where I would put him as far as like the single redraft leagues, but for Dynasty, I don't have my rankings in front of me. I don't know if you have them, but I forgot where I put him. But he's a little higher on my list. And Pittman's a guy that he could eventually be the number one there in Indianapolis. T.Y. Hilton's getting up there in age. They did take Paris Campbell last year in the draft, and who knows who their quarterback of the future is. Phillip Rivers only has a couple years left in him, if more than just this year. But I think Pittman, he could have a very successful career in Indianapolis.
Yeah, no, and out of that group, I really like Pittman. I believe I have him ranked number 11 off the top of my head. And we actually are doing another mock right now, and he just went 6th overall, which I think is a little more of a stretch. I really like him in this spot here. Would you say he went with the 4th pick? In the second round.
Yep.
I really like him in that spot. I actually think he could start from day one. They don't really have a big-bodied guy there right now. T.Y. Hilton is more of a stretch-the-field, smaller kind of guy.
That's what Funches was supposed to be last year.
Yeah, and I think that's what Pittman can be. He's just a younger, better version of Funchess at this point. So I think from day one he could slot in, and he's actually one of my top rookies for redrafts, just because I think he is going to have an opportunity from day one to start. I think Paris Campbell, you throw him in the slot, Hilton and Pittman on the outside, and I think that's the way that they're going to go. So I really like Pittman's opportunity there. Keyshawn Vaughn, I mean, let's talk about him for a second, because I've seen, if there's one individual player who shot himself up boards, it's Keyshawn Vaughn. I don't think if we did a rookie mock before this, just based on talent, that he would have even gone in the top 3 rounds, honestly, maybe a 3rd round pick. But, Tampa's a great landing spot for him. I like him in that spot. I've seen him go in the top 5 in some rookie mocks, which I think is insanity. And that's just people being enamored with Tom Brady and being there. And I don't really have a good explanation for that. I guess you just love the opportunity and the system there. But I'm really hesitant to say that he's going to be fantasy relevant. I think that he's going to be more of a James White type of running back, which, don't get me wrong, if I got James White for the next 8 years in a dynasty rookie mock at the 1st or 2nd pick in the 2nd round, I'd be okay with that. But if you're taking him in the top 5, I think that's pure insanity, personally. Even with the opportunity, I just don't. I mean, and guys improve, guys get better, but I just never saw that kind of talent from him to where he should be going ahead of Akers, Taylor, Swift, Dobbins. I don't think he should be going above any of those guys.
Yeah, they still have Ronald Jones there too, who's been kind of a disappointment, but he's still there, and who knows what Bruce Arians wants to do. Before we move on to the next part of that draft, Denzel Mims, we really didn't touch on him, but what do you think about him as more of a redraft player, his immediate opportunity, especially being there in New York?
Yeah, no, I would agree that he's once again one of those receivers. We talk about Lamb and Judy, who might not score as much year one, but I think they're way more talented and they have more of a long-term play there. I mean, Denzel Mims had a huge Senior Bowl, and I think that's really when his value spiked up, because before then he really wasn't being talked about much, maybe as a 3rd, 4th round guy, and then all of a sudden people were talking about him as a potential 1st-round pick after the Senior Bowl. So, he has the talent. I'm not the biggest Sam Darnold believer, and I hope my Jets friend isn't watching right now, because he would be very disappointed in me. Once again, I mean, it's the black hole that is Adam Gase, which I'm assuming won't be there after this year, but year one it's still going to affect him a little bit. But I'm just not completely sold that Mims is going to be a dominant number 1 receiver. Maybe he's long-term their number 2 guy, and they go out in the future and draft somebody else, but I'm just not completely sold that Mims is a number 1 receiver. But based on, if you're taking him in the 2nd round, I've seen him go in the 1st round in rookie mocks a few times. I'm not as on board with that, but if you're taking him somewhere in the early to mid 2nd round, I mean, he's definitely worth the risk just because he's going to have an opportunity.
Yeah, I think I like him more in redraft leagues too. I think I like him not that Not that I'm a huge Sam Darnold believer either, but somebody's got to catch balls there in New York, so I like him. I like him there. I don't really like the other wide receivers that they got, so I would definitely trust them there. The next four, it went
Yeah, and
Chanel.
I do think I compare him pretty well to Robbie Anderson. So, it's kind of funny he's replacing Robbie Anderson because I think he's that kind of player. So, if you're content with having Robbie Anderson, that's no, and, you need guys like that. But if you're expecting him to be the next big wide receiver one, I would probably hold your horses.
The next four went Chanel, Tua, Zach Moss, and Darrington Evans. Chanel's kind of in that same boat as Denzel Mims to me, at least. It's another. I don't really like the quarterback as much, but it's somebody that, and they have DJ Chark there, so it might be a little bit better for Chanel having a threat on the other side of him. Where in New York, Mims might be double, triple, stuff like that. But Chanel being out there, he could get some opportunities to be open. I probably wouldn't get him until later on in the draft. Here he went 2-5, which is 17th overall.
17.
Not really a huge fan of that. I don't know where I had him in my rankings overall, but like if I'm sitting there, I'm not going to go directly off my rankings. I'm going to go with I might see some different opportunities somewhere else. Tua in dynasty drafts. I mean, I'm taking a quarterback if I need a quarterback of the future. Really, that's what it comes down to. I mean, if Joe Burrow was here, maybe I would think about taking him. My pick isn't for a couple picks from then. So if Joe Burrow dropped to that pick, which would be 2-9, then I would definitely think about taking him there. But other than that, I mean, it would this. That's where you got to kind of go into mocks is thinking who's on my roster if I'm drafting this mock. So it's like, do I have good quarterbacks? Should I assume that I have good quarterbacks, or do I have Patrick Mahomes on my team, or do I have Deshaun Watson on my team, or am I looking at Ryan Fitzpatrick that carried me last year and now I need to replace him? So it all depends on that. But two at 2-6, what do you think about that for a QB needy team or a team that has maybe like a Andy Dalton or something?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good fit. I would even argue if you rode Ryan Tannehill at the end of last year to a pretty good season, and yet you maybe in the mid-second you were looking for a quarterback, I think that's a perfect fit for him. I think I have Tua right around 21 or so that's right in that range there. So a little early, but if you need a QB, I really can't argue with it.
And then Zach Moss and Darrington Evans. I think Evans has not a good opportunity, but it's one of those things where if you have in the back of your mind that A, he's on the tag, and B, he takes a beating, so you could be getting a steal here with them being more of a run first offense. If Henry were to miss any kind of time, Evans could come in there and maybe not give you the production that Henry gives you, but give you the opportunity that Henry might potentially give you because they do like to run the ball a lot.
Yeah, no, and I haven't seen Evans go this high in many rookie mocks, but I actually think it's a really sneaky pick. Not only for the reasons that you just mentioned, Derrick Henry being on the tag, who knows if he'll be there long term, Derrick Henry goes down, but I think actually Evans is going to have a role from day one. And I was actually reading an article from a Titans beat writer that agreed with that statement. They said that he's going to play third downs from day one and play a Dion Lewis kind of role. 2 years ago, Dion Lewis had 700 total yards. I think of right around 50 catches or so. So, if Evans can get you 40 catches as a rookie and even 600 total yards, that's a solid foundation right there. And maybe he has some appeal as a flex play in PPR leagues. So if you're getting a flex in that spot, I think that's a pretty good pick. And I think it's sneaky long term too.
And what do you think about Zach Moss? I'm being the Bills fan.
What do you think of
Yeah,
Zach
I'm still
Moss is a
kind of
better
on the fence.
question.
I mean, we went into the draft knowing that well, I went into the draft knowing that the Bills were going to be looking at a wide or a running back, and they didn't disappoint. They grabbed one. They had the opportunity to grab Dobbins in the second, but they didn't. So then the third round comes around. They take Zach Moss, and I like him. I don't, for fantasy wise though, I really don't. I'm not seeing where he fits in that well. I like him as a Bills fan. I like him on the team, and to split time with Singletary to kind of help Josh Allen out, give us a good run game. That's what we want to do here in Buffalo. We want to pound the rock and then have Josh Allen air it out. But for fantasy, I'm kind of on the fence about it. So I want to get like a non-biased, not my opinion on it. So what do you think about Zach Moss?
Well, I mean, I'll first say I'm a big Devin Singletary fan, and I'm a little disappointed because it's going to eat into at least some of his touches. And I was really looking forward to seeing a full season of just Devin Singletary unleashed because I really think that he could have been, I don't want to say like a top five back, but if he was really unleashed for a whole season, he catches the ball out of the backfield. I really think he could have been at least a top 10 fantasy back with a full season like that. So I don't think he's going to get that opportunity. We actually talked about Zach Moss in another pod before this, and I believe that it was either you and I that said Zach Moss was a great fit for the Bills. I mean, I think he's the perfect complement to Devin Singletary, but the reality is it's going, whether we want to admit it or not, and we're still in denial, it's going to eat into Devin Singletary's touches at least a little bit.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is a PPR league. I don't think Zach Moss is going to catch even 10 balls out of the backfield, if he's lucky. So, that really lowers his value a little bit. Will he maybe score 6 touchdowns on the ground? Maybe will he take over instead of Josh Allen scoring 10 rushing touchdowns on the ground? Maybe he takes a few of those away. That's a possibility as well. So I think he's more a goal line guy, gets you 5 or 6 touchdowns every year, maybe 500 or 600 yards as a compliment. But realistically, whether we want to admit it or not, it's going to eat into Devin Singletary's. And I haven't heard anybody say that out loud yet. I think people are too afraid to, but that's a reality. Is Devin Singletary's got to be knocked down a few notches, and Zach Moss will have some sort of role, but I don't think it's going to be enough to take away Devin. I still think Devin Singletary's an RB2, but I just don't think he has that ceiling anymore.
Yeah, if anything, I could see him kind of being like a Mike Tolbert in Carolina type thing where he vultures touchdowns, and you got Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams in your lineup, and all of a sudden the touchdown's going to Tolbert. So I think that's what Moss is going to be. So we're coming up on that hour. Or actually, we're past that hour that we wanted to go. So we'll finish off this round. We won't get into the third round. We'll talk a little bit about it, and then we'll kind of just close this. We'll close this session out, and this is going to be something that we do weekly, but we'll talk about that at the end. My next pick was Anthony McFarland in Pittsburgh, and then the auto pick was A.J. Dillon, and then you picked Antonio Gandy Golden, and then Chase Claypool, who was I was actually kind of between McFarland and Claypool there. I think Claypool can have a pretty good year in Pittsburgh. They do have a little bit of depth there. They got James Washington. They obviously have Juju, and they got Deontay Johnson. So plus they went out and grabbed. I forget who they grabbed, but they grabbed a tight end this year too in free agency. Ebron, yeah. So they got targets all around. So Claypool might not be immediate, but I think that in the long run, I think he's going to have a good year or a good career with them. But when Roethlisberger's gone, who knows how he utilizes his weapons. So I kind of went with the running back. James Conner is at least from writers standpoint and fans standpoint, he's kind of on the fritz there. I don't know what Pittsburgh actually feels about it, but obviously they wanted another running back. This is the second year in a row that they drafted a running back in the top 4 rounds or so. Or do you remember where McFarland went?
Round.
He did. Okay, so and then they took Benny Snell last year in the 4th round too. So couple years in a row that they're taking a running back with James Conner already on the team and Jalen Samuels on the team. So I don't know where he's going to fit in, but this could be another one of those Baltimore situations where we see a surprise cut in September and then or August, and then McFarland works his way into the lineup. So I like the opportunity there, especially if what they say about James Conner actually comes true and he can't hold up for the season, or if they just don't like the way he's progressing. But I do like that pick there. And then you pick Gandy Golden. Why there? And do you like him over the running backs that were left? And because you ended up even going into the 3rd round, you didn't take a running back in this draft at all.
Yeah, no, and I'll say with a lot of the running backs at this point, I think a lot of them are all questionable. I mean, you kind of already mentioned it with McFarland. I think he's right now the most explosive back that Pittsburgh has. But I do think it's going to be some sort of running back by committee. I like James Conner, but they do keep taking running backs. So I mean that tells you something. So there's going to be some sort of committee, I'm assuming, this year. I personally took Gandy Golden. I have him, I think, 24th in my rankings, so it's right around that range. I like his opportunity in year 1. I still don't think the Redskins have a 100% starting caliber receiver next to Terry McLaurin, so I think Gandy Golden could fit in there. They have a few slot guys like Steven Sims that you could throw in there. They still have Kelvin Harmon, who has maybe some potential there, but I still like Gandy Golden's upside to start there. I could argue that the quarterback situation's not fantastic, and that could play a role, but it's just more of the opportunity for me. I considered Chase Claypool, and just a quick note, there's been some rumblings that Chase Claypool could have multi-position eligibility in wide receiver and tight end, and that would be something kind of interesting to keep an eye on.
Like a little Marquise Colston type.
Yeah, so that would be I love Chase Claypool. And this is kind of weird, but in mock drafts, I have a strategy sometimes where I take guys that I don't want as much because I want to see where the guys I do want fall. So theoretically, if I wasn't to take a guy like Chase Claypool, how far does he fall? I really like LaMichael Pirine this year, but I'm not usually taking him in mock drafts because I really want to see how far he falls if I'm not the one taking him, because I really want to be able to measure, okay, how long can I wait on this guy? So I don't know if people necessarily think of mocks like that normally, but I use it to prep for other drafts and really see where guys are falling. So I like Gandy Golden. I have him right around there in my rankings. Would I have necessarily done that in a real draft? Maybe not, but in this case I did.
Just so you know, LaMichael Pirine went at 3.8, so he wouldn't have made it back to you, but he was almost there. But that's going to be it for this show, for this live show. We have plenty of pods coming out. Got plenty of pods that we're going to be recording even after this show is done. But we only wanted to kind of go for an hour. We hope we answered any of your questions that you had. We had a couple of them. Hopefully as we go on, this gains traction and you guys tell your friends and we could get some more questions out there. And it is rookie draft season now, so I know like people are all excited and getting into the rookie drafts right after the draft ended 2 days ago, 3 days ago, whatever it was. And so we're doing mocks pretty much every day. We got one going on, and then we're going to be going into a next one. So just trying to see where these people land, and if you're doing your drafts early, then you kind of know what's going on. If you're doing your drafts late, you'll have an idea of where your players are going. So anything you want to say before we close it out?
No, I mentioned in the beginning, but if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. We have a ton of content up there, NFL, MLB. We'll have some NBA stuff coming out soon. And it's good content to listen to and watch if you're in quarantine and you're bored and you're getting a little mock hungry. We have a lot of mock drafts that we're talking right now, so go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. We just released our website, thefantasyholics.com. Once again, a ton of articles, usually 3, 4, 5 going up every single day. I have my rookie rankings out right now where I rank every single offensive player that was drafted, so check that out if you have a rookie draft coming up, and like us on Facebook if you don't already, and we're on Twitter.